What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Baseball Development Hub. We are super excited for this episode today. A great conversation about the most important thing in baseball, and that is mental performance. We have Michael Huber, who is a certified mental performance coach who does some consulting with athletes, specifically in the youth. Michael, thank you for taking the time to hop on the podcast and have a great conversation.
It's great to be here, Trevor. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. So, one of the things we were talking a lot off air, and we probably would have wasted all the time that we have together if we didn't check the clock and make sure we got it over with and into the conversation. But start with kind of just the overall importance of mental skills in sports psychology and having the ability to handle the inevitable adversity that comes from being a baseball player.
Yeah, so you took the words right out of my mouth, right? Adversity is sort of, right? We think about baseball, people say baseball is a game of failure, right? The failure, adversity, it's inevitable, right? And I think giving athletes, regardless of their age, whether they're 12 or they're 22, the tools to be able to cope with that failure and adversity and to keep perspective on the game. And there's a lot of, we were talking about this, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? Every kid comes from a different background. Every kid has a different personality. They have different experiences. So from my perspective, it's really trying to understand the player and saying, hey, where are you coming from? Let's figure out what makes the most sense in your mind so that you can maintain the motivation to keep going. Because the last thing we want is for somebody who's a really good player or a kid who loves the game and is not a great player yet to quit because of the adversity that just sort of grinds them down, burns them out, and sends them off to do something that's easier, which there's a lot of things easier than hitting a baseball.
100%. And that was part of the conversation we had off air was how baseball, how quickly the failure seems to come and how quickly it can burn out guys that do love the game or are high performers for a long time. And one of the interesting parts about specifically the youth perspective as guys get into college baseball is how quickly that failure comes in bunches, right? The guys that end up playing Division I baseball, a lot of times they hit 500, 600 in high school baseball, right? They don't play at the highest level. And even if they do, not every arm they see is 90 to 92. How do you kind of go about handling how quickly failure becomes a reality for these guys that, quite frankly, might not have experienced it transitioning from middle school to high school or high school to college or even travel, high level travel to Legion or anything that goes in different directions?
Yeah, I think the preparation piece of it is important. And not everybody embraces it or understands it, right? But like accepting the fact that that failure is going to come at some point, and let's be prepared for it, right? As much as we hear about positivity and positive psychology, well, there's a place for that and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think positivity can't be about ignoring reality, right? Accepting the inevitable. Baseball is a game of failure. So am I ready for this when it comes, right? And so the word that I love to use with athletes, and some they really grab onto it and some really look at me like I have seven heads, is curiosity, right? If we look at the game with curiosity of like, this is really hard, it's going to get hard at times, whether it's, when I'm in high school or when I get to college, like, how do I look at the game and go, okay, this is really hard. I'm doing a really good job of it. What can I learn from these failures that are going to make me a better player versus looking at it as, expressly a reason to beat myself up, call myself names, judge myself, and tell myself I'm not good enough. Because we have to understand that there's so many things we can't control in the game, and there's so much around us. There's so much ability. Like, how can I look at this game and go, I really love it. I want to get better at it. Let's take this failure and sort of try to figure out how do we solve this puzzle versus how do I flog myself every time I don't do something I think I should be able to do, which is really unfair.
Yeah, and you mentioned it there a little bit. I'd like to dive into it to kind of start is it's almost like prehab, right? Is trying to get people to embrace mental skills before the failure, right? So many people, I'm sure, in your line of work come to you when they're 0 for 20, come to you at the pressure moments of their junior year trying to get the college scholarship, come to you when they feel like their career is dwindling. How important is that prehab and building those skills before the failure comes and we have to go out and perform and we might not have the best weekend or month or season that we anticipated?
Yeah, I recently had a father of one of my high school clients use the word hygiene which I thought was a really good word. It's like kind of like brushing your teeth, right? We don't brush our teeth when, when our teeth start to get yellow and my breath starts to stink. We do it every day. Why? Because we want to show up and we want to have white teeth and we want to smell good, right? It's the same with baseball, right? We want to be able to go, okay, like I'm doing this thing every day. So when the heat gets turned up, I've been practicing this thing over and over and over again. I know how to use my breathing. I'm using it in the cage. I'm using it in my bullpens, right? Am I using my refocus cues when I make a mistake in training where the stakes are really low and I think I don't need it to, hey, I've been doing this every single day and I know exactly how my brain is going to respond when I get into that situation in a more pressure-filled environment when the external circumstances are different. Why? Because I've been doing it. If we try to do something in a game that we don't practice, right? It would be like, let's try to lay down a suicide squeeze in a game, but I haven't practiced bunting once all year, right? Like, how do I go and reset myself in front of 20,000 people in Omaha when I've never done it before? Now I'm trying to do something new on the mental side that I have not practiced, which is actually going to put more stress into the system, right? So we want to feel really comfortable with using those skills all the time, almost as if it's second nature, automatic, so that when I get into that situation that is pressure filled by other people's definition, I go, nope, I've been here before. I've done that before. I know how it works. And I'm going to go and execute the process because regardless of my surroundings, that thing still looks the same. And I've got all these reps under my belt.
The best way I've ever heard it explained is baseball is 90% mental, right? We've heard that since the age of time. The first time I ever picked up a bat, that was probably the first thing my dad had said to me was, hey, baseball is 90% mental. But we spend 100% time training the physical, whether that's our arms, our legs, and our physical nature, or whether it's hitting, throwing, on the mound, getting reps. And we don't understand why when that inevitable crap hits the fan in baseball, we kind of pucker and we crumble. And we see so many athletes in those high pressure moments, especially younger athletes, kind of crumble. What goes into that situation to make sure guys, just handle that right? You mentioned kind of cues, breathing, all the things like that. What are kind of the main things that you want to train athletes in those moments that are high pressure, those stakes, to be able to slow themselves down and be able to keep a clear focus on what's directly ahead of them?
Yeah. And so, like, you kind of hit on both of them, right? The cues and the breathing. I think the other thing that I find to be really important is like, how do I want to show up as a player? So, what I mean by that is character, right? Who am I as a player? Who am I as a person, right? If I show up and I compete on every single pitch, whether I'm a hitter or a pitcher, right? If that's the thing I'm aiming for, hey, go compete, even if I don't have my best stuff. Or, hey, I need to really lock in on this pitch because I want to compete and help my team win. That a lot of athletes that resonates with them, right? Like, I want to contribute. I don't have to hit a ball into the gap and drive in 3 runs. Maybe I just need to put the ball in play onto the backside to get a runner in, right? Like, I want to be that guy, right? I don't have to be a star, but I want to be a contributor. And I think when we think about things about in like from an identity or character perspective versus from a results or outcomes perspective, now it's like, well, who do I want to be? Because if I show up and I be who I want to be, the only person that needs to know or is going to know that is me, and I'm okay with that. Versus if I'm judging on results, now I'm relying on not on everybody else to tell me how good I am or I just did what I was supposed to do. No, I know I want to show up to this game this way. I just did it. I could look at myself in the mirror and say, I did what I wanted to do. And all these opinions, they don't matter as much because I had a plan and I was like true to myself. So identity, I think, plays a big part in it in some of those refocus cues. Because it's like, well, how do I want to show up versus, oh, I've got to go get a hit or I'm the best or I got this, right? Like, I got this is one that kind of drives me crazy in some ways because it's like, if I tell myself I got this and I don't really believe I got it, now it could backfire on me versus like, I am this and I believe that about myself, that I'm a competitor. Well, then I'm probably more likely to show up and like engage in that actively because I'm not trying to fool myself into thinking that I don't truly believe.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny that you bring that up because I always used to tell our hitters, it's easy to be confident in the on deck circle, right? Like it was always during my career, at least it was always whenever I was in a slump, it was like, I got in the on deck circle. I got this, right? I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to get out of this slump right now. And then first pitch, umpire calls the ball 3 inches off the plate. It's like, here we go again. I suck again, right? Like, so it's really funny that you kind of mentioned that there.
Exactly.
And being able to handle, like, it's not just as simple as like, yeah, I'm good. I got, like, we're going to get out of this slump or we're going to get out of this rut. It's being able to give yourself more realistic goals to latch onto. Like you said, just flat out helping your team win in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I mean, you talk about quality at bats are such a big thing. It's like you can be above 60% quality at bats and still hit 300, right? Completely different perspective on what success is on the baseball field.
Yeah, defining success is something that I'm really big on, right? How do we define success? If success is defined in those most conventional outcome-oriented ways in a game like baseball, like you're probably going to be disappointed versus did I do what I wanted to do, right? If I judge myself based on a quality at bat metric, well, and I'm successful more than half the time, like I'm going to feel better about myself more than half the time. Or even break it down a little further, it's like, well, what do I need to do to have a quality at bat? Well, maybe I need to use that time in the on deck circle to think about what's my approach. What am I looking for early in the count? What am I going to do if the umpire calls a pitch off the plate for a strike? Am I going to step out? Am I going to start over? Am I going to use my reset, right? How am I going to step back into the box? Right? Those are the things that we want to be able to do. The how, right? What do I control? So it's like, I've got that response planned for when something goes wrong. And now I feel like, okay, if I did those things and I walk back to the dugout with a bad result, I can still go, hey, I did everything I said I was going to do. And sometimes we just get beat. And like, I've said that to young players sometimes. And like, it's like an epiphany, which it's kind of weird, right? But like, the guy's trying to get you out, right? Like sometimes we just get beat with a good pitch and it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to be this like massive referendum on your ability. Like, no, he executed a good pitch. You kind of knew it was coming. You couldn't get to it, whatever. Take it, learn from it, go back to the dugout, flush it, come back onto the field and start over again. And let's figure out how do we win that at bat, win that pitch the next time we're out there, and start to look at it as a puzzle, as a metaphor I really like to use.
Yeah, you mentioned the youth in terms of their perspective of it's a 9-on-1 battle, right? Not only do you have one guy trying to get you out and really good at his job, most likely, depending on the scenario, but you also have 7 defenders behind him also trying to get you out, where it's just one individual. And it's so funny because so many times we talk about baseball is a game of failure. That's such a tagline in the sport. But I don't think people really understand what that means, because we don't necessarily train the ability to handle that failure when it does come. And I'm not saying, and I think this is the thing that gets kind of lost in it, is so many people think that means you're just okay striking out. You're not okay striking out. You're not okay grounding out and missing a pitch that you thought you could handle. It's by giving yourself realistic things to achieve each and every time you step to the plate, and defining your success based on that information rather than what it says on Game Changer at the end of the day, who happens to be by the mom of the backup second baseman that you're playing in front of. And maybe she doesn't want you to look good on Game Changer, right?
Yeah. And one of my favorite things to say to a young player is like, when did you start playing baseball? I ask them, and they'll say, oh, I started playing 4 or 5. I started playing T-ball. I say, okay, well, what happens in T-ball when you hit the ball off the tee and it dribbles 2 feet in front of the plate and you run to first and you get to first? What do? Everybody, yay, that was so wonderful. So from the day you start playing the game, you are conditioned to respond to that success, right? No matter what it looks like. I just dribbled the ball 6 inches in front of the plate and I got the first, and everyone clapped for me. I want that feeling again, right? So I'm only chasing that feeling, rather than saying, hey, that was a good job, Johnny. You put a good swing on the ball and you got a piece of it. But like, we're not like having a party when you get to first base. Or like, hey, good job, right? So you're conditioned to be responsive to the outcomes, right? So at a certain level, that continues from 5 all the way up, right? And so we've got to, I'll just speak for myself. When I'm in that position sometimes with kids, is like, now I've got to start to unwind that conditioning. Right? You've been conditioned to respond to results, whether it's your parents, your coaches, your teammates, whatever. Now we've got to start to define success differently. Let's look at this game differently. Do you love it? Yes. Do you want to keep playing it? Yes. Okay. Let's define success based upon all the good things that you do. Because when they get to high school, I'll ask them, hey, would you rather go 0 for 10 with 10, seeds right at somebody? Or would you rather go 10 for 10 with 10 dribblers off the tee? Right. And most kids say, no, I would rather go 0 for 10 with 10 lasers. Right. But some kids do say, I'd rather go 10 for 10. Well, that tells me a lot about the mindset of like, are we judging what we see and how we felt and what we controlled? Or are we judging the outcomes, which are not in our control, and using that as the metric? Because now we're going to be on that roller coaster of baseball, which we all ride, but does it have to be as long and as aggressive as it is? No, it doesn't. If we have the tools to sort of flatten out that roller coaster and make it a little bit less bumpy along the way.
It's funny you bring up the 10 for 10 versus the 0 for 10. And I always used to use this as an example when I would talk to our hitters when I was coaching in college. And I would say, bottom of the ninth, tying run on second base. I'd rather have you hit a ball 110 to the warning track as a fly out than a dribbler or a flare in the right that ends up tying the game that we go on to win. And guys used to look at me like I was crazy. I said, I'm the hitting coach, right? My goal is to be process oriented and focus on what's going to lead to success. Because when we're in a regional, I'm going to want you to hit as many balls 110 as possible. I don't want you to duck flare one into right and think that's a good process, right? Process over the result there. As the head coach, right? Like as the head coach or anybody else, by all means, you want that that win goes in your win column versus loss column, and whatever comes with that, that's their job, right? And getting guys in college, even you mentioned at the youth level, it doesn't stop, right? Those guys that get frustrated at the college level because the official scorer gave them an error instead of a hit, and they're legitimately frustrated about it and trying, like, that used to drive me insane, right? That was one of the first things we talked about each and every fall was detachment from the results. Like, this is a team-oriented game. We are going to be process-oriented, and being able to focus on that over what leads to quality at-bats and what leads to success overall over the long haul of 162 in the MLB is the example, but let's say 56 games in college, right? I always just say baseball's played in a vacuum. No matter the situation or anything, just execute your process, and it don't matter what happens, right? If you extend that out over 56 games, you're probably going to get the results you want, quite frankly.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think what's interesting, and you know this because of your background, right? The way that your brain works, right, is going to make it really hard for you to think that way when you're under stress. You go into a stress response. That's to go back to what we were talking about before. That's why the preparation is so important, right? Like I can know logically that I'm probably going to fail just by virtue of statistics. But when I fail in that stressful situation, I'm not thinking, hey, you know what? Like, I'm probably going to make an out 7 out of 10 times anyway. No, I'm thinking like, no, I screwed this up. So we got to work extra hard to counteract that and feed our brain that information when things are calm, so that when we get into that situation, we're able to sort of, access that information to like just calm the emotions down and not let the frustration come. Oh my God, I can't believe the official score gave me an error. Okay, can't do anything about that. It's out of my control. Take a deep breath. Let's go back and play the next pitch, right? Versus letting that frustration marinate for another batter or two. Now you get a ground ball hit at you and you boot it. Why? Because I'm still thinking about that, right? So like to be able to cut that off faster. I think the other thing that you said before about sort of like hitting one to the warning track 110 versus sort of that duck snort, right? It's like, when you're in a 2-strike count, that duck snort might be a great outcome, right? Versus did I get the duck snort swinging at the first pitch? Right. And so like, that is something I would talk to, hitters about, which is like, hey, or pitchers, what's your process in these counts?
Yeah.
Right. Like if you get a bat on a ball and 2 strikes and you put it into right field and you flare it over the right field, there's the first baseman's head onto the line. That's a pretty good outcome. It's a good at bat because you were competing and you were just trying to put the ball in play versus, oh, I got a first pitch fastball and like I jammed on it and I snorted it into right field. So like also being able to look at like through the progression of an at bat, what's the approach count to count? And how am I thinking about things? Oh, I swung and missed it at the first pitch. That was my plan. Okay, I put a good swing on it. I just didn't execute. 0-1, I might have the same approach. Okay, so let's let's break it down into small pieces versus like, oh, this bat's screwed because I missed the first pitch. Now I'm in a hole mentally and I'm in a hole literally and I can't get out.
Well, it's funny because as I got higher in baseball, I never understood what they always say. Like MLB guys, they make pitch by pitch adjustments. I used to be like I used to think they meant like hands, whatever your load was. And I think it's obviously the mental side of being able to understand that, like, oh, let's say I cut through a fastball and I got a really good A swing off. Now I'm 0-1. How do I change my approach? How do I change my mental approach? What is my expectation on what a good result is, right? And that, of course, that epiphany comes at 26 years old rather than 18 when it matters.
Right.
But being able to have that perspective. One of the things I would like to get your opinion on is the individualization of coaching, right? Specifically on the mental side. One of the beauties of working with different athletes from different backgrounds and different abilities is each of them have their own processes, right? I always use the example, a good friend still, Connor Cheeseman, who was a guy that played at Arcadia. He always used to tell me, he's like, I know what you're going to say, right? He was an upperclassman. He had experienced failure to ups and downs. I just need a minute, right? And he used to express his frustrations differently, and being able to allow him to have his avenue to get that minute to get his frustration out. And he might let a couple F-bombs fly, and he might be frustrated and pound his helmet into the helmet rack or things like that, compared to another kid that you can see them walking back to the dugout and they need somebody to come put their arm around and pick their head up in that moment. How do you kind of handle the individualization of the coaching to make sure each guy gets the TLC, for lack of a better term, of what they need when they handle that failure?
Well, listen, I'm fortunate that the vast majority of my work is with individual players. So I have that luxury, right? I have the luxury of not only being able to individualize the coaching that I do to each person, but I lost my train of thought here. I have the ability, but I also am objective, right? So like the example you were giving, you were an on the field coach, right? There's still a conditional relationship there, even if you have a really good trusting relationship, right? You're still a coach, they're still a player, and there's decisions that have to be made, right? So I have the luxury of objectivity and have the luxury of doing everything one-on-one. So like I'm able to do that. But what I stress to players actually is what you described, which is you might not get what you need from a coach. Why? Because there's 34 guys on the roster, right? Because I've got recruiting, because I've got fundraising, because I've got families, I got stuff to deal with. You might be used to getting one-on-one coaching from your high school coach because you're the best guy. Now you're in college and you've got a staff of 3 guys who are trying to handle a whole team and all these other responsibilities. So you have to learn how to be able to coach yourself. That's something I'm big on, right? Like understanding, being self-aware. Hey, I'm pissed off that my coach is not doing this or that thing that I want them to do. Well, you got 2 choices. You can be pissed off about it and let it affect your performance, or you can do something about it. You can go knock on a door, right? You can go talk to your coach. That's on you, right? You might not like what you hear, or you might not get a good response, but you got to take responsibility, or you can learn to coach yourself through it without having that conversation. I have a process to coach myself. I have a process to work through the frustration, right? Like now I'm getting that individualized approach internally. That's what I have most control over. I don't have to rely on somebody else, because the disadvantage I have is I don't get to be with kids on the field. I'm only getting that perspective from them generally. Do I get to go watch them sometimes? Sure. But we talked about a player you have a relationship with that you coached at one point that I coached in high school. And like when I was with him and that group of guys, like I was with them every single day.
Yeah.
I'd see them through thick and thin. I'd see them laugh. I'd see them be upset. I'd see them interact as teammates. Like as a mental performance coach, like the guys who are at the college and pro level who get to do that, I'm jealous of, because I don't get to see that, right? So it's a really delicate thing. Ultimately, it comes back to, for me, you've got to learn what you need. You got to be self-aware as a player. You got to learn what you need as an individual, and you got to go get it, whether it's from yourself or somebody else. If you don't, then that tends to turn into excuses of I'm not performing well, and then I'm not getting what I need from the outside, and that's not my control. And that's not where you want to be, because that's going to really put your performance into a nosedive a lot of times.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point. And I think that's one that if there's any athletes listening to this or even coaches is that what each person needs. Like they have to control what they control
Mm-hmm.
internally, right? And so many times in the transfer portal era, every freshman goes to a college and maybe the situation doesn't break as much. Well, I didn't you always hear those kids on the other side, well, I didn't get XYZ from the coaches, right? They didn't get this. Well, it's because they're trained, like you said, in high school, they're the best players. So they get the attention. They play every day. They play through slumps. They play through errors. They don't get moved in positions. When you get to college, it's a lot bigger of a group. It's a lot better of a group. There's a lot more competitive, right? Everybody's on an even playing field. And we always hear these kids leave, and it's like, well, I didn't get this. Coach didn't do this. And there's blame to be thrown around instead of just having the tools necessary to be able to have the skills to handle what comes from being a college baseball player, which is A, competitiveness, right? B, failure, a lot more because guys throw 94 in college compared to high school. You only see that once a month. Whatever the situation that comes up, we have to have the tools necessary to handle that and be our own best coach, which is where
Mm-hmm.
people like you come into the fold. And that's why it's awesome to see more activity in the space on that side because athletes are better prepared to handle that inevitable crap when it hits the fan.
Yeah. And I think to the credit of the players and their families, I think they understand that, right? Like, hey, we need to have some new tools to be able to handle this landscape, which is really stressful. And that's the reality of it, right? I think one of the things that I've learned as a mental performance coach and a dad, I have a couple of teenagers, neither of whom who plays baseball anymore, but they're both athletes, is what I learned was when they were really young, I was like, well, winning doesn't matter. It's just how you play the game, right? Like,
Yeah.
then I realized winning matters to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and once I realized that winning matters to the kids, like, okay, winning matters to you, and that's okay, right? But what are you going to do to win? Right? You have to be able to handle what comes with it. And if you don't have those tools, you're going to drown, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of players are realizing now, like, hey, you know what? In the transfer portal era, like, I might go to college, I might be a D1 guy, but I could very easily find myself cut after the first year because I get no at bats. That's an inevitable reality, right? So what can I do that's in my control to get as many at bats and produce as I can that first year? But if it doesn't happen, what am I going to do to handle it and be prepared for it and be able to cope with it? Like, that's the preparation part of it, I think, is just so critical. And I think we all just assume everything's going to be great until it's not. And now we're scrambling to find the answers. And that's a hard place to be, especially when you're trying to produce in a game like baseball.
Well, it's response to failure, right? It's no
Mm-hmm.
different than when you get a strikeout in a big situation or when you get cut from the team because the situation wasn't catered to what you needed and your expectations. It's all response to failure. And that's the beautiful thing about mental
Mm-hmm.
skills from my perspective is it does blend over to life,
Mm,
right? So
sure
many times
does.
that's why people like to hire baseball players is what they say is because they've handled failure, right? You've had to look yourself in the mirror and feel not good enough each and every time and respond, get back up off the mat. We get
Mm-hmm.
punched on the mat each and every day we play the game of baseball and getting back up when the crap hits the fan. People handle that better beyond the baseball career than they do within it sometimes because they learn those lessons and it's a trained skill because response to failure, it doesn't just failure doesn't magically end when you stop playing baseball, contrary to what maybe some athletes think, oh, this is tough, right? It has workplace implications, it has life implications, it has relationship implications. It comes up a lot.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think being a person who has that resilience, there is a value to it outside of those lines, right? But I think something you said without kind of saying it directly was like, I think the thing that I notice, and you could probably relate to this as a former player, is about identity, right?
Yes.
Especially
Mm.
nowadays, right? Baseball is your identity for a lot of these kids, right? Like, I am a baseball player. And if I don't produce in a way that's aligned with like the way I see myself and the way I think the world sees me, I'm a failure,
Mm-hmm.
which is not true, but it is true if you think that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So being able to sort of mold and shift that identity of, yes, I am a baseball player, but these are the things I identify with. I'm a hard worker. I can deal with failure, right? I have a good attitude. I'm a good teammate. My identity is in the character element of being a baseball player, and it's not in the production performance side of being a baseball player, because it's going to be your identity. If you play high school and you play summer travel ball and you play in the fall and then you lift and hit all winter and you do it 12 months out of the year, it's only stands to reason that that's how you're going to look at the world through that lens. But if I look at it as, hey, I'm a really good person for dedicating myself to this craft and being able to handle this failure. And I look at myself in the mirror and go, man, you're pretty tough. You can handle all this crap, versus looking in the mirror and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't hit that curveball. Those are two totally different things. One's way more sustainable than the other, just from a control perspective.
Yeah, well, it's funny you bring that up, because that's a big piece of stuff that I've talked about with athletes as they wrap up their careers. Like, it's use myself, Trevor Powers, baseball player, right? Like, that's how many baseball players feel when their career wraps up, is that like, that is their tagline. And I always used to joke with guys as in high school and colleges, be like, that pretty girl down the hall doesn't care whether you went 3 for 4 or not, right? You think she might, or they think that, and this will tie into a conversation that's probably bigger than the time we have left in the recruiting conversation, right? So many athletes think if they commit to a Division I school and have that opportunity to get that dopamine from an Instagram post and 2,000 likes and comments telling you how great you are, they think things change automatically when they hit that pinnacle moment of like, the girl down the hall thinks you're prettier, you're a better person, right? Just because you've committed to this school. And quite frankly, you're not. But so many athletes put so much pressure on themselves getting to that moment. And as the landscape changes, pressure becomes even larger, where better baseball players aren't going to Division I schools now because roster sizes are so limited. You mentioned off air that you have a lot of conversations with recruits and recruiting and that perspective. Talk a little bit about how you go about that conversation of trying to detach their identity from X commit at Y school.
Yeah. And the first thing I would say to any player is, a coach's opinion is just one opinion, right? Now, it's an important opinion, right? If I want to go play at a particular school and the coach at that school, the recruiting coordinator, doesn't like me, yeah, it's going to affect me, but it's just their opinion. It doesn't mean I'm not qualified to play at their school. It just means they have a different set of criteria, or they have an opinion about what I bring to the table that doesn't fit what they need, or their roster construction's a certain way, right? So being able to look at that and go, there's a lot of reasons why someone might not want me, and be able to like look at that through a very honest lens and be like, hey, there's still somebody else who's going to want me. If I show up every day and I keep doing the things that I'm doing, someone's going to like me. It's a process. Or there's a different, also what I talked to them about is there's a different path to where you want to go these days, right? We talked about this before, which is, I can go to Division III or JUCO now, or Division II even, and say I could start there if my end goal is Division I, and still get to the end goal that I want, if I'm willing to accept that path and embrace it, right? Look at it as an opportunity. Look at like that challenge as something that's going to make me a better, higher character player, and look at my identity through that lens versus like it's D1 or bust, which is so typical, right? And I'm comparing myself on social media about this kid who I play against. He's D1. I'm not committed. What's wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with you. There's a gazillion reasons why that coaching staff picked that kid. It's not because you're not qualified. It's just because this is the way it worked out. If you can't see it that way, it's going to be really hard to separate from the result and from the outcome and someone's opinion. And, focus on the process, right? If I love baseball and I want to just keep getting better and I want to get to this level, Division I, if that's the goal, it might not be today, but I'm committed to it no matter what, right? I used to work with a guy who is he's a pro. He's a pro now. He pitches in, one of the team's minor league systems, and he started with another team. He just got released and he got signed by another team. And he always said to me, he said, listen, Mike, he's like, I don't care what uniform I get to the pros in. I don't care if I'm 35 years old. That's what I want. That's my goal. I'm going to do it. Right. And so for him, it was like, I don't care what it looks like. I just want it. Right. And so like, it could be the same for a college kid. If I really want this, then I'm willing to like absorb whatever this looks like because I want it so badly and I love the game so much, versus I just need that outcome to make me feel good, to validate myself. Then, like you said, then what? You get that moment, it's over. Everybody forgets, but you're still stuck in it. Now what? Can you keep going and stay motivated?
So many athletes think that the commitment post is the pinnacle, and I always used to tell
Yeah.
guys as I worked in recruiting, that is the first step, right? Like, trust me, when you're 40, you are going to talk about your college career, the people you met, the memories you made, the conference championships you had,
Mm-hmm.
not your high school career and the lead up to that commitment. So many athletes think that that's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have a great college career and hopefully professionally and play baseball as long as you can, right? But so many people tie it into the social media element of
Yes.
committing. And I think it ties a bow on everything of, like you said there, control the controllables, right? You don't control what a coach wants in a player. They might want 6'3" left-handed hitter. You might be 6'1" right-handed hitter. Doesn't mean you're not good enough, right? You
Yes.
can't control that. You can't control the transfer portal. You can't control the landscapes and rosters shrinking. You can't control those things. What you can control, being the best version of yourself each and every day. And I think that's the most important lesson to take away from it. Michael, we got to be respectful of your time. I already know right now we're going to do this again. Don't know when for our listeners that are listening now, but be on the lookout for that because there's so many different avenues I want to continue to go down because this is such a great
Yes. I would love
conversation.
that.
But why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you specifically and if they want to reach out and get in contact?
Yeah. So Michael V. Huber is my Instagram and my website, michaelvhuber.com. So you can reach out to me there. You can sign up for a newsletter, get podcasts, all that stuff. So yeah, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I would love to do this again. I think there's a lot of stuff that we did not even get close to scratching the surface on that we could go down the rabbit hole on.
100%, 100%. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to do this. If this is your first time coming across our channel, make sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss a video.